Bonjour, alors voilà, c'est pour expliquer la pince
In
temporelle.
Tenet, we follow our protagonist, who is
Protagoniste,
recruited by a secretive organization
sécrétive,
of the same name, and their mission is to prevent the destruction of the
world.
world. Our future descendants have discovered the secret of inversion, a process by which they can reverse the entropy of things, allowing them to travel backwards through time. The future wants to fully reverse the flow of time, as the effects of climate change have made their world unbearable. But in doing so, they will destroy the world of the present.
Yeah.
Helping the future is a Russian oligarch named Sata. He has been tasked with bringing together parts of an algorithm which will allow the entropy of the entire world to be reversed. He is looking for the last remaining part of the algorithm. Turnstiles. What are they and how do they work? Turnstiles are machines which are able to invert objects and people. The red side of the turnstile is for people who are moving forward in time, and the blue side of the turnstile is for people who are inverted and will experience events that have already occurred in reverse order. In this example, the forward-moving protagonist in red is making his way into the red side of the turnstile to become inverted. When he looks through the clear barrier between the red side of the turnstile and the blue side, he sees his inverted self walking backwards to the blue side of the turnstile because the forward-moving protagonist is going to shortly invert and become the inverted version of himself, going through past events, and that's why they both exist in that same moment. The only way for an inverted person to rejoin the forward-moving world is to use a turnstile again and revert. The inverted protagonist will have to enter the blue side of another turnstile, or even the same turnstile he just used. But to keep things simple, let's give him another turnstile. As he is entering the blue side of the turnstile, he will see a forward-moving version of himself make his way to the red side of the turnstile. This forward-moving protagonist is not the same as the previous forward-moving protagonist, who has his own separate journey in the same timeline. This new forward-moving protagonist is protagonist 2. A helpful way to be able to distinguish people moving in the forward timeline and those that are inverted is that the latter have to carry their own air and wear masks because inverted people's lungs are not able to breathe in the air in the forward-moving world. Events in chronological order. Tenet is constructed like a puzzle with pieces of information scattered throughout the story which comes together right at the end. The film opens at an opera house in Kiev where underground CIA agents, Ukrainian forces, and Sata's men converge to try and acquire the last piece of the algorithm that has surfaced there. The protagonist is one of the undercover CIA agents, and he finds himself held at gunpoint by someone working for the other side. He spots a hole in a wall which seems to be fixing itself, and suddenly a bullet goes backwards through his adversary. The protagonist's rescuer is a man dressed in combat gear who runs away, wearing a backpack with an orange string and gold disc dangling from it. The protagonist ends up captured anyway and is tortured for information, but opts to take what he believes is a cyanide pill, choosing death over betraying his teammates and his mission. This all turns out to be an elaborate test to see whether the protagonist has what it takes to be part of the Tenet organization. He is given limited information and is told that knowledge is divided amongst the members. The reasoning is that if people know too much of the events that are about to unfold and act differently, then things cannot happen as they need to in order to be able to save the world. The protagonist meets with a scientist that shows him how inverted ammunition works. Bullets travel backward into the protagonist's gun rather than the other way round. He deduces that the ammunition came from an arms dealer in India, and he makes his way to Mumbai. The protagonist calls for assistance, and help comes in the form of Neil, who seems to have done his homework on the protagonist, even knowing what he likes to drink. When the protagonist meets Priya, the arms dealer and also a member of Tenet, she insists she had nothing to do with inverting the ammunition and says it's all Sata. She urges the protagonist to get close to Sata and find out more. To that end, Priya sets him up with a British intelligence contact that may be able to help him. The protagonist meets with Sir Michael Crosby, who gives him some background on Sata. He also tells the protagonist the best way to make contact with Sata is to go via his estranged wife, Catherine Barton. She is an art expert and she mistakenly authenticated a fake Koya that Sata purchased. Sata knows of the mistake and uses the painting against Kat, threatening her with the police and incarceration if she attempts to leave him. He also controls and limits Kat's access to their son. The protagonist tells Kat he will steal the painting for her in exchange for help getting close to Seta, and Kat informs him that the painting is in a free port in Oslo. Neil and the protagonist come up with a plan to steal the painting by driving a plane through the back wall of the free port, which will revert the internal locks to factory settings. The protagonist and Neil, who is a talented locksmith, will proceed to pick the locks and enter the inner chambers of the free port, where they are hoping the painting is stashed. Everything goes according to plan until the protagonist and Neil encounter a turnstile. The protagonist is on the blue side of the turnstile and Neil is on the red side. Suddenly, two masked men jump out of the turnstile. One is inverted and fights with the protagonist, and one is forward moving, after whom Neil chases. We will revisit this scene later, but for now, let's keep moving through events in chronological order. After the Freeport incident, the protagonist once again meets with Priya, who reveals how turnstiles work. Priya tells the protagonist that the missing piece of the algorithm is now in the hands of Ukrainian security services and will be being transported through Tallinn. Kat, under the impression the protagonist was able to steal the fake Goya, makes the introduction between the protagonist and Seta. After some convincing, Seta agrees to let the protagonist try and steal the missing piece of the algorithm for him, and this sets the scene for a car chase in Tallinn. This scene is the first time we see a section of time in both directions. After attacking Kat at the Freeport, normal Seta hides away. The protagonist manages to lift the missing algorithm piece, and while he and Neil are driving down the highway, they are joined by two other cars, an SUV and a Saab, both seeming to travel backwards. The SUV contains an inverted Seta threatening Kat, and the Saab is being driven by an inverted protagonist. The protagonist throws the missing algorithm piece into the Saab and throws an empty orange case to inverted Seta, who along with his henchman exits the SUV, leaving Kat alone in a runaway car. The protagonist manages to stop the SUV from crashing, but he and Kat are kidnapped by Seta's henchmen and taken to the Freeport, which contains a turnstile. The protagonist is taken to the red side of the Freeport and Kat is on the blue side with an inverted Seta. Inverted Seta interrogates the protagonist and shoots Kat with an inverted bullet. Normal Seta emerges, but when the cavalry, a backup team that Neil has radioed for help, arrives, he quickly jumps into the turnstile, inverts, and starts making his way back through the events that have passed. After realizing that Kat's only chance of survival is to invert her, the protagonist, Neil, Kat, and the cavalry invert themselves. Let's now go through the events in reverse order. The inverted Seta emerges from the turnstile, unshoots Kat, and interrogates the protagonist. He then retraces his steps to make his way back to the car chase. The inverted protagonist also emerges from the Freeport and gets in a parked Saab, which he has seen himself driving during the car chase. The inverted protagonist locates the orange case he threw to inverted Seta and plants a listening device into it, as he knows that inverted Seta will at some point have that case with him. When inverted Seta does indeed pick the orange case back up, the inverted protagonist hears him tell his henchmen to take the pieces of the algorithm they already had back to the hypercenter. Based on this information and Michael Crosby's earlier revelation that there was an explosion that took place at Stars 12, Seta's hometown, on the same day of the Kiev siege, the protagonist will correctly guess where and when Seta will be attempting to hide the completed algorithm. When all three cars are back on the highway, inverted Seta spots the protagonist throw the missing algorithm piece into the Saab. It is at this point in time that inverted Seta discovers where the missing piece of the algorithm is. He will go on to inform his men where the piece will end up and when, so they are able to retrieve it from the Saab. After Seta spots the protagonist making the handover, the SUV slams into the Saab, which flips it over. Inverted Seta will return to light the Saab on fire, which results in heat being drawn away from the inverted protagonist and him getting hypothermia. Inverted Seta and his inverted henchmen then drop Kat off at the Freeport. This happens off-screen. From Inverted Seta's perspective, this is the end of his journey with Kat during this sequence of events. But for Kat, who so far is experiencing events in the forward timeline, this is her being picked up by the Inverted Seta, and she still has the experience of the car chase and of her being shot ahead of her. The inverted protagonist is rescued and rejoins Inverted Kat and Inverted Neil. The intention is that once Inverted Kat has had some time to recover from her wound, they will revert and rejoin the forward-moving world. They journey to the Oslo Freeport because they know there is a turnstile there, and they will also be able to access it by arriving at the time when they had previously breached the Freeport defenses. The inverted protagonist enters the scene and fights with the protagonist as he makes his way towards the turnstile. After the inverted protagonist enters the turnstile, he emerges as protagonist 2, who starts to experience things in the forward timeline again. After he is unmasked by Neil, he runs out of the Freeport and signals for the waiting inverted Neil and inverted Cat to revert. Inverted Neil and inverted Cat revert and become Neil 2 and Cat 2. They are now further back in time than protagonist 2 and must wait for him to emerge before they can regroup. Once back together, they figure out that after the Talon car chase, inverted Sata must have gone back to Vietnam, where he enjoyed a recent holiday with Kat and their son. Sata has inoperable pancreatic cancer and intends to kill himself. He plans to send the future the details of the location of the algorithm upon his death. Communication with the future occurs as events are logged. As emails, news reports, bank transactions, texts, etc. are recorded, the future is able to know what has happened in the past. Neil reveals that forward-moving Sata was present at the Kiev siege, so inverted Sata had the opportunity to go back to his yacht in Vietnam without danger of there being two of him present at the same location at the same time. Therefore, on the day of the Kiev siege, inverted Sata was holidaying in Vietnam, while his men were attempting to bury the algorithm in Stars 12. Protagonist 2, Neil 2, and Cat 2 need to stop Sata, and they use turnstiles once again to invert and go back in time. Inverted Protagonist 2 and Inverted Neil 2, along with an inverted cavalry, travel to Stars 12 in order to try and extract the algorithm. Inverted Cat 2 travels to Vietnam in order to delay Sata from ending his life and letting the future know where the algorithm is before the team are able to successfully extract it. Sata's men plan to place the algorithm at the bottom of the hypercenter and a bomb will be detonated which will bury it. Before the Stars 12 battle, the cavalry are divided into two teams, the red team who experience the flow of time in the forward direction and the blue team who are inverted. A red team splinter unit consisting of Protagonist 3, who was inverted Protagonist 2 and has now reverted, and Ives head to the hypercenter to lift the algorithm. For simplicity, we won't number Ives. As Protagonist 3 and Ives run into the hypercenter, they fail to notice a car honking to try and stop them. They set off a tripwire and the hypercenter entrance is sealed up, trapping them inside. But as there's nothing else for it, the pair barrel on towards the bottom of the hypercenter. They find a locked door that stops them from going any further, as well as a dead body wearing a blue armband on the other side of the locked door. Volkov appears with the algorithm and Sata calls Protagonist 3 from his yacht and taunts him as the end of the world nears. Sata ends the call by instructing Volkov to shoot Protagonist 3, and as Volkov does, the dead soldier comes alive, stands up, and takes the bullet. The soldier is inverted, and after the bullet hits him, it immediately reverses backwards and re-enters Volkov's gun. The soldier proceeds to open the door for Protagonist 3 and Ives, who wrestle the algorithm away from Volkov. Finally, the mysterious soldier runs away backwards. Protagonist 3 and Ives still don't have a way out of the hypercenter until two ropes land at their feet. Without asking questions, they grab them and are lifted out to safety. They discover that it's Neil, or rather Neil's 3, who has rescued them. Inverted Neil 2 was originally part of the inverted blue team, and he spotted Volkov booby-trap the entrance of the hypercenter. Knowing this means Protagonist 3 and Ives will get trapped in the hypercenter, and in an effort to save them, Inverted Neil 2 reverts and becomes Neil 3. He finds a car and races over to Protagonist 3 and Ives just as they are entering the hypercenter and honks at them to try and get them to stop. This is the car horn we heard earlier. Neil 3 finds another way to rescue Protagonist 3 and Ives by dropping down ropes to the bottom of the hypercenter. When Protagonist 3, Neil 3 and Ives are all back together, they have a brief conversation and agree to hide the algorithm. But Neil 3 realizes that his mission isn't finished. He needs to go back into the battlefield once again because it was he who was the dead soldier who helped Protagonist 3 and Ives in the hypercenter. No other locksmith they know is as talented as Neil. Neil 3 will invert again, run into the hypercenter, open the lock gate, and take Volkov's bullet, meant for Protagonist 3, and that is when his story will end. Protagonist 3 is devastated to learn this, and Neil 3 comforts him by letting him know that they will meet again. Who is Neil? During their final conversation, Protagonist 3 notices a red string and a gold disc dangling from Neil 3's backpack, revealing that it was Neil who saved him at the Kiev Opera House. Before Neil met the protagonist in Mumbai, he had already saved him in Kiev. There are hints throughout the film that Neil is, in fact, Kat and Sata's son, Maximilian. In keeping with the theme of the film, if you take the last four letters of the name, Maximilian, and invert them, it spells out Neil. After the events of the film, the protagonist who has formed a connection with Kat may have joined her and Max. In that case, his and Neil's relationship will have started years in the future for the protagonist and years in the past for Neil. The Sator Square. The Sator Square is an ancient word square containing a 5-word Latin palindrome, which means the words contained in the square read the same backwards as forwards. The words in the square, Sator, Arepo, Tenet, Opera, and Rhosis, all make an appearance in the film. These palindromes allude to the nature of how time can be experienced in Tenet, that is both backwards and forwards. There are 3 large set pieces in Tenet: the Oslo Freeport scene, the Tallinn Highway car chase scene, and the Stars 12 battle, where multiple people are moving forward and backwards through time. I will be publishing videos diving deeper into each of these sequences, explaining exactly what happens, so keep an eye out for those. As always, thanks for watching, please make sure to like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.
Voilà. Bon. C'est un peu
Welcome
résumé.
to my recap of Christopher Nolan's Tenet.
Oui, plus tard. C'était juste pour résumer, en gros, ce qui se passe. Donc, que dire de plus? Voilà. Comment expliquer plus précisément et plus simplement? Peut-être avec ça, c'est tout simple. Voilà. Coucou. Oui, j'ai caché une caméra dans le nounours, mais pas à l'endroit que l'on croit. Voilà. Alors, devinez où c'est, d'après vous. Je laisse imaginer la suite. Je fais pas de dessin, ça risque d'être censuré dans le clip, mais bon, il n'y eut pas de répit, pas de trêve, pendant des heures et des heures. Oups. Voilà, celle-là est très dure. Bref, tombé à l'eau. Donc, en résumé, on va choisir un autre chapitre. Non, celui-là est meilleur. Non, difficile de faire le point V d'ici. Et comme ça, voilà. Descendants. Et celui-là est plus intéressant aussi. Yeah, well, honest. Star. Sagittarius. Not so much. So, this is how you get, well, anti-gravity through Hawking radiation. Right here. Yeah, well, I said, but then again, nobody's listening. So, good luck next time. Xbox, meet, well, you know, who am I? Who do you think am I? After all these years? Parrot? Corsair? Or very, very weird and, well, guess what? Yeah, it's all coming down from time. Lot of time. And dental floss also. But mostly for these guys. And those guys here, you know, those are still alive in Africa. Because, yeah, I've got, well, let's say friends in high places that I understood how to read, in a way. It seems clever right here, right now. It seems also ominous, like you said, or somebody said. In a way, I'm just a pragmatic linguist. Voilà, affiliated with Electronic Frontier Foundation. I've got my card. I got my t-shirt. I got my, well, look. And from there you can define who I am. I don't know. But I'm everything and nothing else. Right in the middle. Yes. Right in the middle. Oh, Greece, by the way. Yeah, right here. And here too. Reading the signs. Huh? What size am I, by the way? Remember that? Give you a hint. Well, all of them. Never mind. So, be safe, be well, don't worry, be happy. Shit happens, I know, trust me. And, yeah, Nice run, huh? But again, it's all for the future. Not mine. Mine is screwed up. Well, I mean, not screwed up. It's actually screwed. It's précis, pointu, and, well, a lot of computing. See? Right. And that guy too. The thing you don't know about, huh? And the rest. All of this project. All of them. Which reminds me, by the way. Oh, right. Yeah. These guys. And these guys. And these guys. See? Well, what do you see? What do you think? Let's say this part. Yes, there are. Secret source right here. Machine to go through time. Want it? Guess what? It's right here, in a way. The rest is the art of science, and now is the heart of, steering the world toward better virtues. A set of common virtues. I understand how it could be made. I know precisely how it should be made. But I'm not going to say anything because it's not my part, okay? Not yet. Here I'm recording for, let's say, future you, my friend, and see you next time. Adults, huh? Loving adults. And by the way, don't get it too hard, but adults are not exactly those who say they are adults. Once again, we are all made of stars. Et comme disait l'autre, nous n'héritons pas la terre de nos ancêtres, nous les empruntons à nos enfants. Alors voilà, c'est pour ça que je donne. Et je te donne tout ce que j'ai, ce que je vaux. Tous les défauts qui sont autant de chances, etc., 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 la Terre. Donc après Mercure, Vénus, en gros, ça signifie après s'être flingué la tête toutes ces années, ces centaines d'années, ces millénaires même, avec des trucs comme, je sais pas moi, le patriarcat ou matriarcat ou je sais pas quoi, et ben il va être temps de réfléchir à ce qu'on appelle l'intelligence émotionnelle, qui est une partie de l'intelligence. Et les deux, ensemble, permettent d'avoir un équilibre, ou un cheval de Troie. 2, 3, 4. En tout cas, la Deuxième Guerre mondiale a bien eu lieu. La troisième aura lieu, mais différemment. On appelle ça la guerre de l'information. Bah là, hein, vu et reçu. Pour le reste, vous savez
In
quoi
this
faire.
video, I not only recount the
You know what is going on. I already said, in my way. But it's only one side of the equation. The other side is what you don't know. And what you don't know can be very, very, very scary, like crazy scary. So you don't have to go through that. You just have to accept that you are yourself. Maybe accept that you made some mistakes and move on, okay? Because nobody has to die. Well, people die every day, but I mean, I died enough to know that nobody else has to go through the same kind of drama. 49 years of life and pain since I was 3 years old. Yeah, guess what? 46 years of pain, and I'm still feeling it right now. So, I'm just a kid, like any other kid. I'm also an adult, you could say, but I know the difference between a child and a loving adult, and I'm seeing a lot of children among men mostly. So grow the fuck up and realize you are not what you think you are. If you are cheating others for your own benefit, then maybe you want to revise what you think about the fucking world. Take it from me, taking as you wish. Bye. See you. Bisous.